9 My childhood friends 9.1 Eugene or Jinya 6 He was a year older, bigger, and stronger than me and always beat me on whatever game we played, including the cards, but he was my only friend, living next door in my neighborhood. It was our last big move in Vincenti before we finally had our apartment in a nearby town my parents worked. It was of my childhood ending and favorite time period. It was my first summer my parents didn't send us to the hated pioneer camps. It was my first and probably the only free summer I had. The summer I learned how to swim. I liked the foothill street we had moved to when I was in 5th grade. It was a 5-minute walk to my school. The bus stop was right outside the window. The Bakura-Staff highway was crossing through the Vincenti village right with our street almost dividing it in half. I wished I would never leave that place. It was then I had my last and favorite pet, a dog called Liga that as a puppy was brought along on a rainy December day by my next-door classmate girls. By the way, I also loved this place because it was a place Irina lived at, the most beautiful classmate girl. Olga was good too. I remember my first morning in a new place. I was going out 6 in Russian to my school and there were these 2 girls passing me by. Irina was thrilled. The whole class knew that we were neighbors now. That very evening they called me out for a walk and that's where I met Jinya who lived right opposite me across the highway. So we became friends. I was 11 years old. I had not much socialized with girls before Irina and Olga. From then onwards we would all gather around Irina's place in front of her house to play balls, hide and seek or just fool around. I guess I was a bit in love with Ira. I remember that after my first such interaction with them, I couldn't sleep well, kept thinking about her. She had that sporty drive, she ran faster than anyone in the class, went to athletics. She had a strong and beautiful voice. She often sang and read poems on festive school events. She had beautiful eyes with long and thick eyelashes and her strong body was, faster than others, getting out of the childish shape. I mean she was only 10 when we, the boys, noticed her breast protruding out in her clothes. So I was lucky, every boy would love to have such a girl living next door to him. It felt really good. You see what I mean? Jinya was my friend up until I was 17. Then it stopped. Jinya was the third and the most recent child in his family. He had his an 18 older brother and a sister who was 14 years older. As it always happens, the youngest is often the most spoiled. Jinya was the one. He had everything I had not. He had a tape recorder and he was going to buy a classy VEF shortwave portable radio and he almost amassed 90 rubles for it, just needed to save 8 rubles more and he is done. An incredible amount of money for me. How the hell could he save them? I would never know. But he had shown me that cash himself. Plenty of crumpled bills and coins. Looked like he really has been saving them. And he had a lot of nice clothes too. And one day he bought that radio. I walked down the railway sleepers with my parents and sister to our home from the town and we were about to pass Jinya's house when he called out for me. He was sitting up there on the roof at the entrance to his house loft and waving me and holding up his brand new radio receiver. Some radio. Probably it was the best made in the Soviet Union. In the evenings, we now listened to the Radio Monte Carlo music shows. We never listened to the enemy voices. Up until I was 13 I firmly believed in our Soviet not-so-rabid propaganda about the Soviet Union being the best and right sort of advanced country fighting to free the oppressed humanity, for peace to the world and, in fact, for all the good. We heard nothing yet anything about Sevenovgorod Safe, probably he had not been aired at the time yet. Jinya had a dog of the same age with a stupid name Fluffy. What a smart dog it was. Unlike mine, the 1-year-old stupid red Liga I loved so much and we often would take them to the lake for swimming or fishing. We went there almost every day. One day Jinya came to me at school in tears, his fluffy dog had been hit by a car as it was crossing the highway. It was hitting on my Liga. I remember I was at odds with him at the moment on something and I immediately forgave him everything I held a grudge on him for. After a while, he got him a new dog he called Pirate, but he had no attachment to it. Once we had a good scuffle with a gypsy gang for our fishing rods. Okay. Before I start writing about it, let me make myself clear on this. I have nothing against gypsies whatsoever, and The Gypsies Are Found Near Heaven is one of my favorite Soviet movies. Anyway, it was a pretty cool and overcast day, not so good for swimming but still okay for fishing, and off we went, leaving our dogs home. Actually, we always feared gypsies. Although they went to school with us and technically they had same civil rights like all of us, still at the household level we all regarded them inferior to us, and there always was an invisible kind of segregation between them and us. They always sat in the back rows at school classes and teachers almost never bothered them. Neither did we. A couple of times I had a fight with them though. Once it was when I was 8, I fought with a classmate, Vanya Tsagulenko. All Vinsady gypsies had either Tsagulenko or Kazachenko names, at least I never heard any other names. My pencil case was gone. I searched everywhere after school and couldn't find it. Damn, my parents would kill me for it. And this Vanya pulled it from under his desk and teasingly held it up against me. YUF. Of course, I wanted it back. Sure, he wouldn't give it back to me, swearing that it all was his. Yeah, right. While fighting we broke all the pens and pencils and rulers in it, what made me even angrier, and I got really bad on him. Now his elder brother came along to help him out, and a teacher all of a sudden found my pencil case somewhere. We had identical looking cases, pens, and pencils. Well, they were not exactly identical as saw it now, but still, they looked pretty much alike and they were easy to mistake. Then Vanya's elder brother was after me for about a month, demanding the money for broken pens and a ruler. I never paid him anything. Anyway, it was okay to fear gypsies, we all had prejudices against them. Anyway, we were fishing on the lake and there was almost nobody except us and a pack of gypsy boys who just showed up. We didn't like it at all. They were all younger than us, but there was a dozen of them and nobody else on the lake but them and us. In addition, our bad premonition came true. They suddenly, as if commanded, ran towards our direction. Quickly surrounded us. Asked us to let them fish a bit with our rods. Okay. Why not? Go ahead. All rods were Jinyas, by the way. I couldn't afford them. Well. They fished, smoked cigarettes. One of them offered me one. I said no, I was too young to smoke back then, and we waited for them to have enough of fishing. One of their leaders threatened Jinya to throw him to the water. Later we laughingly recalled that moment and Jinya masterfully mimicked their accents. He always was good at mimicking funny accents. Then, suddenly, they quickly pulled up stakes and fled off. Jinya cried at them, "Give them back. Give them back. Please." Then, suddenly he turned back to me, "Let's fucking fight for our rods." He was so fierce with hatred for a moment, to tell the truth, I lost my courage. There were only 2 of us against them all and the rods were not ours per se. But it took only a fraction of a second for me to get my cojones back. My friend was in trouble and you never give up on your friends. Let's fucking go. And we raced after them. Jinya threw away all his bags with fishes he had already caught. He didn't care. He was really mad. I still was not particularly angry with them. Oh, dear. Jinya quickly caught up with the last one he chased and began to beat him up really bad. I ran after the others and then stopped. What the hell was I running for? We already got one and they all soon would be back to rescue him. Roma people are known to be very team-minded. That's why we probably were scared of them all. Sure enough, they all soon turned back and now they were charging at us throwing stones and sticks and I caught a really one right in my hip. You don't feel any pain on adrenaline and, when you fight for the just cause, your force multiplies tenfold. And an unequal battle started on the field. No way were we going to win this battle, we just had gotten engaged. We were going to die fucking hard. The tractors showed up on the horizon. They were plowing the field. "Hey, Jinya, it's my father with his crew. You're fucking dead. You know that, you ragheads." I winged. And the miracle happened. Right at that moment they all jaded. After a short Mexican standoff we seized the moment and Jinya took his rod back. "Where's the fucking another one?" Jinya asked menacingly. It turned out they hid it somewhere in the rushes, we just had passed by running after them. "Listen up, you little punks," I said. "Jinya, you keep an eye on these," and I put an arm lock on the one who hid the rod. Actually, it was the one who had offered me a cigarette. "I'll look for the bait. If we don't find it, I am going to take care of him." I pulled the prisoner's hand, break his fucking neck or his arm to begin with. Now when I remember all this, I couldn't help it but wonder how we, the only two of us, could manage to intimidate and take a dozen gypsies under our control. We were always to fear them. So, threatening the rest of the gang by fierce violence which my father and his crew was about to put them into if we either don't find another bait or if they flee before we want them to, I went with my prisoner to look for it. Jinya stayed too to look after them. Damn, I would have danced for joy, to be honest, if they fled. They apparently really believed in our monstrous intentions. My prisoner gypsy boy was humbly seeking the rod, and the rest obediently waited for their fate. I kicked him to hurry up. We all wanted to find the bait before tractors arrived. The Roma wanted to get away before my angry father with his crew showed up, and we wanted this to happen before they all saw us bluffing. If they saw it, then we would be dead for sure. We'd lose more than just our rods then. Fortunately, the bait was found faster than the tractors arrived, and we released our prisoners, giving goodbye kick to some of them and threatening that it wasn't over yet, we were going to band together to raid their neighborhood. Fuck, we were good, and had good fishing that day after that too. Such was the story. Jinya and I were very proud of this. We had defended our rods and honor. Actually, I noticed one thing in Jinya. He, for a man of his size and strength, was, well, how shall I put it, a bit too cautious. Maybe it was good. If he was as violent as, say, my other friend Sergi was, you will read later about him, or me at least, he probably would have been dangerous to others. Still, I was a bit jealous of Jinya's strength and always wished I had been as big as he was. When I started going to the wrestling school though, I felt that the difference between him and me started to disappear. Moreover, he told me this too. He started going to that school too. First, we trained in different groups, then we got us in the same group. Still in different weight categories. He was always bigger than me. In 1977 the French Three Musketeers was aired on the Soviet TV, and we made swords and constantly fought playing musketeers. After the French version of Zorro with Alain Delon starring in it, we switched to a new game. I have a scar left on my hand after one of such Zorro games we had when Masked Jinya was freeing the captives, imprisoned girls Irina and Olga, I was about to sell in a slave market. I remember Irina bandaging my hand in her home and, as if by chance, her firm breasts touching my hand. There was a field with a forest belt behind the road where we'd go in winter for sledding on a hill. That field was seeded with silage corn for cattle in the summertime. But before haying, the corn cobs would often get ripe and we would go to steal them. We would steal a lot of them. Harvest them. Since then, I love boiled corns. We also would go to the forest belt to cut the twigs for fishing rods. The best was made out of poplar and lilac twigs. With Jinya and my dog Liga, we also played the border patrol guards. His fluffy dog was not good for that, it was too old for such games. Our frontier border was the single-track railroad to our industrial area beyond the lake. My Liga was a good patrol dog. Our neighboring street boys often joined us in that game. No one would be able to cross the border with my dog and me without getting caught. I wrote already that we went to the lake almost every day. I was getting better and better at swimming. However, I never dared to swim to the buoy, it was way too far to me. And then came the day when I made up my mind to it. I focused. And off we went, Jinya and me. To my surprise, I made it easily, wasn't even tired much. After that day I would swim there several times to buoy and back every time I took to the water. From then on, no one would tell me I couldn't swim, any real boy should. I never dared to swim across the lake though. They said the opposite bank was over-silted and it was very easy to get bogged down there. Now that very place used to be our lake. We swam with Jinya there and went boating with Sergi and girls has turned to some reedy wetland with a destroyed wall on the shore where used to be a summer cafe and a toilet. It was very sad to see this and very pleasant at the same time to stay there and bring back my memory of my sweet childhood and youth. When our family moved to the town, we maintained our friendship and regularly visited each other. Jinya got him some good Commodore open reel tape and a turntable now. Jinya, unlike me, had a zero musical literacy, but he, unlike me, was very good at singing. He loved music, but what he listened to was, as we would say now, a pop and disco music crap. He hated the fashionable at the time and more advanced rock and roll music. I had nothing, no TV set, no tape recorder. We also liked to go to movies. There, perhaps, were no significant movies we missed with him. Then, later, my brother-cousin Ruslan joined us. For some reason, we were no longer together with our next-door girls. There were stories told, a lot of stories, about Irina running wild, whoring around. She was seen with gypsy boys. And she was beautiful now. She looked spectacular in her leather jacket and blue jeans, but her seasoned whore reputation kept me away from her. We were growing up. Soon it was time for him to join the army. In early November, it was unusually cold and snowing. I and Ruslan were invited to his farewell party. I did not know Jinya had such beautiful cousins. How come, Jinya, you kept them away from me for so long? What kind of friend are you? It turned out that one of them knew me all along. How come? Seen me on Andri's pictures, she was dating him once. Everything was going great. I was dancing with her only. But we had to go to say hello to our yet another friend. Sasha, my classmate, he also was going to the army and invited us too. I wish we had stayed with Jinya all along. And off we went, me and Ruslan. Thank God, Sasha lived on the same street so it shouldn't take us too long to get there. Besides, I couldn't wait to get back to Jinya's good-looking cousin. Every spring and fall the boys were getting drafted in the USSR. The village was buzzing with parties. Damn. I had forgotten my cigarettes. My bro didn't have them either. Some big guy was passing by. I asked him for a cigarette. He told me to go fuck myself. Ruslan, the damn peacemaker, tried to talk sense to him, about our good intention, and blah 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 thing. But I was, boom, snapped and attacked him. He was a big guy alright, but nothing could stop me, boosted and reheated by the alcohol. People all over ran out to the street to noise we had just made. A lot of them knew us. This guy with the strange name, or was it his surname or nickname I would never figure out, Drum, was going out from Sasha's party. He just had a fight with his girlfriend and was fucking pissed off, and that's where I and my cousin came in. All those who just drank together at Sasha's party all were fighting now. For both side. Drink and fight, how could we not stick to the rules of genre? That's what we are supposed to do all the time. I lost this damn drum and fought with the others. Then there was some kind of break and the girls were picking up hats and scarves of the guys just fought and handing them back to their owners when I saw the drum again, and the hell broke loose again. And again everybody fought everybody. I lost the drum guy again. And Sergi with Vera the redhead came along. Sergi asked, "Who the hell did this to you?" I couldn't talk much, everything was swollen, and I was drunk. What we drank at Jinya's had finally gotten to me. All I managed to utter was drum, and Sergi disappeared. He had just waited for a chance to redeem himself, read on Sergey chapter on this. They said he found himself charging at drum and quickly getting his ass kicked. What I was saying. That drum was a real big guy. Again we all looked for our hats and scarves when I stumbled on Sergey and Vera. Sergey was focusing on his another try on drum for me and Vera tried to talk him off it, at the same time crying and shouting at us, "It's because of you. All because of you. Why the hell you came here? Why?" Sergey got his ass kicked again. It sure didn't work well for him on drum. But it worked well on his friends, not as big as him. He still was good. I again found this drum big boy. After that, I never found any hats nor scarves at all. This time my ugly coat sleeves were gone too. For good. Well, they probably weren't overly happy to see us there after all. Maybe we should go, Ruslan. And off we went. I didn't want to come here anyway. Halfway to Jinya the 4 guys from Sasha's party caught up with us, the 2 of them I knew from my childhood. They all were older than us. I and Ruslan began an unequal battle with them again. Some said it looked creepy from the side. And Ruslan was fighting after all. Even crushed someone's nose. Here we go. It was very cheering. We'll show you, you damn, ah. Even though I was drunk I still remembered burst of sparks kept flying from my eyes with each blow I kept catching with my face. Wasn't it Jinya with his beauties passing us by? Ruslan. Yes, it was him all right. Asshole. Beating the shit out of each other, we stormed around and somebody properties, breaking fences and a bench and it was damn slippery and it was hard to keep a balance, especially when you are shit-faced like that. Well, we didn't win the battle but Ruslan helped both sides not to lose their faces much when he said, "That's fine guys. Let's stop at that." And they left us alone. That's what I was saying, he was a peacemaker, damn it. And here comes Jinya with his girls again. They walked. Ruslan said, "Well thank you, Jack, for your precious help. For everything. You are a true friend. The fucking best." I said nothing, merely waved him a fuck off to him. First, I could not speak. Second, Ruslan had said it all. Jinya wrote me letters from the army with his apologies and explanations why he couldn't help me out. Like, his girls held him tight, wouldn't let him go, they had been very frightened. Later my mom told me that he, after the army, came to us, I wasn't home, once and my mom had said to him that one shouldn't give up on his friends. Ruslan saw him once on the lake. They even talked. Jinya said he never forgot that incident but all this was my fault, to begin with. He had started all this. To what Ruslan said no one would dispute this. It was my fault all right, no doubt about that. But is it an excuse enough to bail on friends? Well, I came to see him in 2008. Same house, posh once, now it was heavily lopsided. He was as big as usual, only disabled, after a car accident, he had been through long before. No normal jobs since then. He had 2 sons and a daughter. His sons were not as big as he was though. I forgave him. We would never become friends but I no longer was going to hold a grudge against him. I could see that this still was preying on his mind. Everyone has one sweet childhood and youth memories and he had this. Not a very pleasant thing to live with. Because you shouldn't have bailed on your friend, Jinya. Forgave him 9.2 Sergey. I saw him when I came along this school in 2nd grade. This short blonde boy didn't stand apart from the others. I remember I was amused to hear his high-pitched voice. I also remember when we had a shuffle over something, I quickly pinned him and lost interest in him. What a wimp he was. We had become friends in the 4th grade when he started going to an after-school group. It was this time when he was becoming prominent. With his specific sense of humor, he was constantly amusing us all and it was then when he began to show some literary talent and our teacher would read his works to the class. He also turned out to be a hell of a fighter, something that would come in handy to us. People's behaviors are well modeled in classes. There always will be leaders and outsiders in any classroom, and groups are often at war with each other. Such a group was created by me and Sergey, which then subjugated the whole class. I remember Stepan. He was both toughest and fittest in the class when I came along. So it was thought. He was feared. My relation with him varied from friendship to fierce fighting. He was a tough guy, all right. But once I saw him crying in front of his mother, when she was summoned by the teacher to school, and she was looking at him with hatred as the teacher had a hard going on him, and I saw him getting soft, and I realized that he was a doormat man. And I started putting him down. In the 5th grade, he was still regarded as the most influential in the class when I dethroned him. And in the 6th grade, I made him an outcast. Literally, no one would even talk to him. I was seeing to it. And I cruelly punished those who violated the boycott. The older guys would even come to take up the cudgels for him and teach me some lesson. They picked on the wrong guy and had no choice but to leave me alone. Anyway, the boycott I had arranged against him turned out to be so pervasive and effective to put him down, and Stepan was down and low, and I decided to ease off the grip on him. I started saying hello to him, and he gratefully responded. I would invite him to join us in playing football and some other activities with us as well. Though I understand that I had the authority to manipulate the class, I still wonder, how the hell could I do that? With Sergey it was a true peer friendship. I was bigger than him, therefore, stronger, so I never had the desire to check it out, and we had never fought. To become even tougher, in the 6th grade we enrolled together to Greco-Roman wrestling school in a nearby town, and were very happy and proud about that, and in PE class we would do some sparring show or some couple of tricks with him in front of our class so they could see how good we were. However, after a little while, we were expelled from that school in disgrace. In Soviet time you didn't have to pay for any training in children's and youth sports school, but you had to be doing good at school to qualify for that. Well, to begin with, we didn't like when Nikolai Fedorovich, we called him Nick Fed for short, announced to bring our diaries for the next training. But we reassured ourselves that maybe not all the boys that went to this wrestling school were daredevils like us here in town, but no way they were nerds of some sort either. After the next training, Nick Fed was checking our diaries. One had too many CS, equals to 3 in Russian USSR 5-point grading scale. Nick Fed severely lectured him and gave him a stern warning: if things are not getting better next time with him, he would consider saying goodbye to him. We looked at each other and tensed. The one who had an F was in serious trouble. He had his last warning. The turn came to us. Well, he has counted 28 FS on mine. And 36, on Sergey's. The whole group counted and recounted them. They fucking couldn't believe it. Then Nick Fed had the group lined up. There were 2 stacks of diaries in front of the coach, one big and just our 2 diaries on the other, and the coach, in front of everybody, loudly declared that we were out and none of us would ever cross the shelter of this school. The next year I signed up to his different group again. I was doing much better in my next school in town. Sergey has never dared to show up his face in front of him again. In fact, a lot of those F marks were given to us unjustly. At least the good half of them was put in by freaked out Zinka, the math teacher. Well, she is worth to dwell a bit on. She is now the mayor of one of the largest cities in Russia. She is an intelligent woman and has made her a dizzying career. This is generally true for short people like her. And she had a bad temper. She was teaching us since the 4th grade. She, in fact, was the C class, the most rampant class and our allies in our eternal war with the A class, homeroom teacher. Ours was the B class, right in between those extreme classes. She was the youngest teacher, short, with a huge blonde braid. Sergey instantly fell in love with her. At her first lesson recess, he kept saying, gasping with delight to me, "She's so beautiful." I wouldn't know, she was a good-looking but nothing of special to me. but she must have been hot for sure. At the beginning of our 6th grade school year on the second geometry lesson, Zinada Vasilievna demanded a first student to tell her the definition of a circle. He didn't know he was supposed to know it by heart. An F. Your diary, please. She got to the next one. Again an F, your diary, please. So she gathered diaries from half of the class. She was pissed off at something I would never know. No one, as I remember, knew that we were supposed to know the definition. She opened the diaries to put her F marks. A lot of diaries, well, it was the beginning of the school year, for crying out loud, they were not even filled up, so she filled all the blank lines with more F marks, so many of us had 5 to 10 of them at a time. I had 15, that was about my whole year's quota. The whole week waited to be filled up in my diary, and Zinka, to save her time, and mine for that matter, drew a fucking ugly fat and huge red F mark on the rest of the blank page. She fucking flew off the handle. Fucking loose cannon. She must have hated me really bad. She'd fucking just killed me. My dad with his sick temper will surely gag me. And sure he did. Both him and my mom. My parents would never think that a teacher could be in any way wrong for once. It goes way back to a Soviet slave mentality. My father, as you know, never handled me with gloves and whacked me good with his leather belts for every F marks I had. Nick Fed had his pleasure too. I had made his day all right. He showed that big fat red F on my diary page to his lined up squadron. Nice teachers, huh? Sergey is almost the only person we're still friends up to these days. When I moved to the town, we stayed in touch. I missed that rural place and my old school. Well, Vincenti was not as well maintained as the town I now lived in, but everything there was so home to me, a bit violent but simple. The Lermontov and Vincenti's young men were always feuding, but I never participated in this. And, as you might have noticed, I love my Vincenti rural school more than the one in Lermontov. I think you understand why. I still communicate with many mates from both schools, and now look what I see. The current Vincenti classmates' die-off rate is about 4 times higher than that of Lermontov's. Had I stayed in Vincenti myself, my chances to die would have been 4 times higher than that of Lermontov's. And when Vincenti and Lermontov fought each other wall to wall by the lake, Vincenti would win most of the time despite the constant Lermontov's outnumbering of people. And once, when Vincenti was quite close to lose and almost collapsed under Lermontov's charge, a cavalry, the Vincenti's Roma on donkeys, suddenly came up to help. Perfect timing. They tipped the scale and Vincenti won again. But more often than not the cops would show up and intervene before it all even started. Informants seemed to be doing their jobs fine. Nevertheless, I once got beaten for being in the wrong place by my Vincenti fellow guys. Before that I always went to visit my old school before the shoal holidays, when we had fewer classes, and so I had a little time to visit them while they were still there having their classes. This time I went there before the May Day holidays. I was 15 then, and I was going to Greco-Roman wrestling school for about 2 years, was doing fairly good in the local wrestling competitions, but I was getting more focused on what is now called fitness workouts and was lovingly building up my muscles 7. And I started looking differently at my ex-class girls and noticed that Lena, for example, had beautiful legs. And look at once tall and awkward Natasha. Wow. And my ex-next door friend Irina. No matter what they were saying about her. Anyway, I made it see my old class. And I talked to the guys. And to girls as well. It was especially good to talk to my ex-teachers. Damn, it was good to be in the spotlight. That's what I got beaten up for being in the spotlight. We all got to the street in a recess. It was the end of April. What a lovely sunny it was. It was almost summertime out there. I took off my jacket. Let them see it. I had my favorite t-shirt on. Stupid. I should have paid a little attention to a group of older school students smoking at the school library corner, so the teachers don't see them, and were looking at me somehow intently. And I wanted more than just standing up and showing off. I went up to a bar, jumped up and began doing chin ups and rotating, overdoing a bit of my showing off. There were a lot of girls standing up out there too. I was so damn good. And that group of smokers moved towards me. That's where I finally got it. I just had it fucking coming. And the biggest sparated from the group came up to me. "What is your name?" he asked, lighting yet another cigarette. "Radic." "Hey. Did you hear? Radic, his name is, haha." He turned to his group. "What fucking kind of name is that?" He obviously was provoking me, and I saw that I was not going to get away that easy. I have lived long enough in Vincenti to know that. But why? Doesn't anyone remember me anymore? Or was I an alien to them now? And do you know who am I? He kept going on me. "Have you ever heard the Swan name?" Hell, yes. Of course, I have. "Is that you, the Swan himself?" I must have looked intense but still decent. "Hey." He obviously didn't like the fact that I hadn't known him in person. "I saw him before, I just didn't know it was him I was talking to." He was 2 years older and half a head taller than me. I started measuring him up so I would die as hard as I could when the second one came up to me from the crowd and just said, "Let's go." I knew him too. He was a year older and his name was Jura, and I saw I could probably handle him, but I knew I was in trouble big time. 7 In my new school there was a girl who tried to grab my biceps with her 2 palms in the gym class, and she couldn't, and she spoke expressively about it, so I had goosebumps on my skin. After that I, motivated, went to build my muscles up to get them look even bigger. My class got silent and stayed put this way all along. They all knew the Swan all right. With me there his name had not been that known yet. Okay, we all went along behind the school building. On my way, with the group, Sergi quietly said to me, "Never fret." But he himself looked alarmed, frightened even. If there are people among you who have not seen how people fight, I will explain. When there are boys up to 10 years fighting, they rarely result in bruises and even nose bleeding, no broken teeth either. It all ends up with tears only. Looks more like a cockfight. But starting with 13 to 15-old boys there is quite a different matter, and injuries are getting more serious. It's more like pit bull dogs fights. It may get really nasty sometimes. I do not know, probably with such moral support this Jura had, he expected to easily beat me, but in the first seconds of the fight I had his one eye swollen and shut completely, and his second one didn't look much better. Things definitely were not going well for him. I told him, loud enough for everyone to hear us, that he might want to stop it. He was not going to win. He said, "No. Go ahead." In front of his cheering supporters, he knew they wouldn't let him lose it, and get maimed as well, I suppose. I still hoped to walk away on my own feet, so I did something to win over some of the crowd which was not very friendly to me. How naive I was. It was late 70s, it was a karate rampant fashion time, and anyone who kicked with Kiya Cry thought he was Talgat fucking Nigmatulin, the Soviet version of Bruce Lee, we hadn't known yet, and a USSR movie star, himself. And I was kicking, and in fact, it worked great, with Kiya Cry too. When Swan saw that things were getting really bad to Jura, he stopped the fight, turned him to look at him, and then turned him to the crowd with the words, "Look what he just did to Jura." He handed over him to somebody and, bang, landed me the fucking one. I had the sparks in my eyes and I charged back at him, and I had someone else's good sidekick from behind. It would be a trouble for me to handle Swan alone, some later said, though I would have torn everyone apart, especially on such adrenaline I was, had they fought me straight 1-to-1 each. And what could I have done against the two at once? I wasn't fucking Bruce Lee Almighty, after all. I lost my balance, was lying on the ground, and the two heroes kept beating me up. After a while, being conscious all along, I didn't feel pain at all. Then this Jura with his puffy eyes and a broken nose resurfaced from the crowd again, pulled up my head by my hair to see if I had any bruises on my face yet. I had none. And right after that I had a couple more heavy blows with his trendy jackboots in my face. He had to fix it. He would have been hurt, but I still didn't have many bruises even after his kicks, just deep abrasions left by his jackboots. And I was told that for about a month he wore big bulky sunglasses and some teachers were making fun of him about some younger boy beating him up. However, it may have become the reason for my 2 eye surgeries years later to fix my retinal detachment. The surgeon said that apparently, I had a concussion of some sort or some other serious injuries that had caused that inveterate retina damage. Perhaps that was the case. Even after that, I was able to stand up and dared Swan to come again. He turned around to give me yet another good one. There was not much I could do to fight him back. I was a pulp with my leg dislocated. Kolya, my classmate, who even didn't know how to fight, came out and pushed aside the Swan and pulled me out that crowded arena. I never visited that class anymore. Not that I nursed a grudge against them all along. Just felt that it ceased to be my class. I was told that after the incident, the teachers publicly shamed my ex-class boy in front of the girls for failing to help their comrade. Just look, they would say, at those future warriors, the motherland protectors on whom we were supposed to rely on. Sergei took it to his heart, by the way. I didn't hold a grudge against him either, but it was a good lesson for me. Never get fascinated by people and you won't be disappointed. Never get fascinated by anything at all. And I never did it since then. I only wish I could learn though how to handle betrayal and perfidy as well. Sergei actually has redeemed himself. That was very incident I had lost my another childhood friend Jinya. You read it in the chapter above. It was when we were at Jinya's army recruitment party, and with my bro, we went to say goodbye to Sasha, who was going to the army and had his party as well. There, as it so happened, I triggered a major brawl, a real battle on the entire Vincenti Broad Street. Sergei was good fighting like a lion for me then. Well, we had all our asses kicked there anyway. There is a lot one could write about Sergei. I wrote about his sense of humor. He also wrote poetry. A little naive in the sense, but very rhythmic and immaculate by the structure. I wrote my music to his just for a moment I wanted and uploaded it to my YouTube. Sure, he had some literature gift along with this innate spelling literacy. I remember how our class teacher would give him a stack of notebooks for him to check, and they sat together checking the other students' homework. I do not remember whether he was entitled to put the grade marks though. I even don't know how it all would be pedagogically correct, but the teacher had recognized his innate literacy. We had all seen that. By the way, I wasn't much inferior to Sergei in that either. Sergei, despite being a creative hooligan. Once I don't remember whose idea it in fact was, but I was to get it in the neck from Zinka for this, not Sergei. In recess before the math class painted the whole blackboard with the chalk and finished right before the recess ended. Then they couldn't wash the board out. Whenever it dried up, it'd go white again. Yet he was very vulnerable and sentimental. Once, when Sergei was waiting for me to go to school, a truck hit a puppy right in front of his eyes. Puppy screamed and, by the time I went out, it died. He was crying all the way to school. And a classmate asked him what had happened. He pounced on him and beat him up good. That's how he felt sorry for the puppy. By the way, Sergei had forgotten this incident, and, when we were drinking, I reminded him about that. There were a lot of things to travel down the memory line. We liked to remember our after-school girls, Olga, another Olga, the redhead Vera. Our night boatings on the lake. After the army we would thumb through his diaries. He, unlike me, kept them. We would fall about like crazy on them. The teacher, overwhelmed with anger, would write down anything to get the parents to do something with their kids. Wish I remembered all those teachers' emotionally driven stylistic howlers. Like this one I remember written with red ink sweeping hand strokes. He has put a cap on the Lenin bus's head. Please look into that. Sergei would have made a great book reviewer. With his literature talent he was very good at commenting the teacher's sentences' stylistic shortcomings, some of them taking up the half of the precious page of her desperate emotions. Not so long ago we, with our wives, drank together and I remembered those diaries. How about to see them and have some fun? I suggested. He immediately pouted. Obviously, it wasn't a good idea to him. He'd no longer kept them, he said. I should have known better than that. He had a grown-up daughter who adored his father. He was a hero to her, and probably was doing good at school too. Sergey and I also like to remember our youth after the army. It was a bit violent, a bit carefree. When we celebrated our birthdays we couldn't help it to get sad, apparently, we didn't want to grow up. Look at Lena, Olga's sister, she had grown and become even prettier than Olga herself. She was gorgeous. On one of the farewell party, one of our friends was getting drafted, it went just perfect with her. And late at night, we bailed out on them with a group of girls. I walked holding Lena and she invitingly squeezed my hand. But drunk Talian was always behind us, an overstuffed bear who was my sister's classmate once. Long time before he had his ass kicked though, and since then he constantly showed me his scar under his lower lip, making fun of that. His class was on duty at the school that week and Talia told me to take my headgear off. No boys were allowed to wear their shapkas inside the school building. That was the rule. What the fuck? Damn, I had no time to straighten him up, I was late for my class. I went on, but he, the fucking squirt, tried to remove it from my head. Fuck me well. I turned around, jumped up, he was taller than me, and, right on the fly, I gave him a heavy blow in the jaw. I clocked him good. He immediately went down, and I went to my class. The combined force of my blow was such that I broke a hole on his lower lip so, as he later said, he could easily breathe through it. And he had that scar ever since. And now he brought it up again. It wasn't good. No, not at that moment. I saw that he didn't like that I was hitting on Lena the Beautiful that evening, and, in fact, he never liked that I and Ruslan showed up in his neighborhood and booked the girls around. I do not remember how exactly the brawling started. It was a bad joke I had made, I think. It was something I replied to him like, but I'm still better than you. That was our inside joke with Ruslan. Big mistake. I should have never tried it on Talia. He scowled and kept going on me like, why the fuck you're better than me? What is so fucking special about you? I tried to talk some sense back to him. Tried to explain that this was only my joke. I didn't want him to ruin my date. But it was useless. Well, why the fuck not? I had not fought for a while. In fact, it was my first real fight after the army. Damn, I was still good. I, being drunk, quickly thrashed this bare big guy. But the girls disappeared immediately. It was okay. I mean, normal girls are always terribly afraid of any fights, of any over-aggressive men. Normally I am not overly aggressive either. Sergey tried to stop us, to break up a fight, but he was not big enough to handle us and got bounced off like a chip. Sergey was a great fighter himself, but in the different weight category, especially compared with Talia, the sumo wrestler-looking guy. But I beat him. We would stop and start again. No more talking sense to him. I would beat him again and again. Finally we stroke our hands. Peace. You've always beaten me up. He said, still feeling hurt. Anyways, we made peace before the locals started gathering up, it was his neighborhood after all. We even had a couple more drinks after that. We had been good friends since then. Bad thing though was that he had ruined my date with Lena anyway. I found her. She sat on a bench with some pretty teenage boy and I felt that it was too late, I no longer was welcomed by her. Damn you, Talia. An asshole. A party pooper. It was also thrilling to think about bragging to Ruslan on dating Olga's younger sister. Olga used to have a crush on Ruslan once. But it was all gone now. It was really a good time. Well, how about students from Leningrad? They feared our local and very aggressive, as they thought, girls. They taught us all their student songs. I still remember one. They cast my bullet for a somewhat long time, they robbed me of my freedom and hide it from me. Something like that. We went with them to the disco and glanced down at the local girls. Fucking take that. Sorry, but we are not available. Not for you. We are with students from Leningrad, you know. No wonder they were afraid of the locals. To me, they were just friends. I had dated nobody. I was still missing Alio. Well, I would never say that my personal life was very much a success, but to him, apparently it all went even worse. He has sacrificed his life for his daughter as well. He suffered, and still suffers because of his out-of-the-line and drinking wife whom he apparently never loved. And nothing of his sparkling charisma and these senses of humor I remembered was left on him. What a shame. I asked if he still wrote poetry. No. How about playing the guitar? No. He didn't remember when it was the last time he took it in his hands. Well, I felt I was looking at the Chekhov's Ionic. Whenever we drank at his place, he would turn on his Mikhail Krug, very Russian criminal world song singer who got himself assassinated for something, karaoke to sing along. That's how he entertained himself. Then, when he was 50 years old, his granddaughter was born, and now he lived for her too. Of course, I am happy for him, but he did not leave anything personal for himself. Sergey, if you're, all of a sudden, reading this and recognized yourself, please, do not be offended, I don't know how to embellish the people. Sergey has always been naive with little resistance to propaganda, even to the Soviet one which was extremely inefficient for the most in the last Soviet 10 years. Well, I never thought of myself being very smart in the exact science, but I would overcome this with perseverance, and I love science. He is even less smart and certainly has nothing to overcome it with, and with his taste to paternalism and religiosity he had since his childhood he is, as they say about guys like him, strong-headed. Suggesting that he never makes his way in life. It's true. They are not leaders, they are good soldiers. 9.3 Andrei remembering Jenya, Andrei, my cousin Ruslan, some screw-loose women, I couldn't help but think. Why they all were doing this to me. Why they all would betray and desert on me. I had never started any relationship with them ever since, but I always would have gotten attached to them first. Was it me all the time something wrong with? I didn't make friend with Andrei immediately in the class either. He was a strong, athletically built, but still, he wasn't of any high-profile kind of a guy. He almost never fought, so he never was good at that. He never had a say in his class, and he was of no interest to me either. Even though he went to athletics. However, in his 3rd or 2nd grade, I remembered him involved in a scandal. He brought homemade porn pictures, styled on as playing cards, to school. All black and white and of poor quality. He must have stolen them from his older brother. He handed the cards out to his classmates and they had made their ways to our teacher. The scandal was cosmic. I still picture the teacher frisking him. She even pulled his socks off. I remember I was amazed how quickly he cracked on everything, on how he got those cards, how many of them they were, etc. If I had myself caught on something like this, I would do anything to weasel out of it. I would never admit anything. I always got myself in trouble for it from my parents, school, and kindergarten teachers. He had a sponge-like memory. All the books he had read he remembered almost by hearts. He would read for 6 hours at a time. I would never be able to read for more than 2 hours without a break. He would read science fiction for the most part. He also tried to write his own stories which, though misspelled, had made a strong impression on us. At the same time, he was doing not that good at school. In fact, he was neglecting his schoolwork. He was really bad with Russian classes, just like me. At least, didn't make spelling errors, as he did, and his math was just as bad as mine. He liked drawing though, but he wasn't good at that either. Because I loved drawing myself and knew a little bit more about painting. I had an uncle the artist after all. By the way, I would ask those who idealize the Soviet education system as the best in the world to pay some attention to the fact why such on the whole gifted kids would still be doing badly at school. Perhaps, something was wrong in the Soviet school, in the system approach. Don't you think? Andrei would regularly toy with his ideas of constructing a steam engine, a wing glider, crossbows, or putting a play in the school assembly hall on something about space frontier pioneers or even something similar to young volunteers. All these would go to nothing, but the beginnings always were pompous. Once we came up with yet another secret society, we had even made its charter, admitted some chosen ones to our brotherhood and solemnly sworn allegiance to each other to death, to save the world and catch the spies. We were not close friends up until 6th grade. Once in the summer he suddenly came to our place and spent the whole day with us. He brought along his homemade firearm. It would take a while to fire with, you would have to spend some time to load it with the redheads for gunpowder taken individually from each match, then ram it well inside the barrel with a ramrod made of a steel wire, then further load it up with pieces of wires or a pellet. Then set the light at a tiny hole on the barrel side. Damn. I still keep wondering how the hell we had managed to keep our eyes, fingers, or arms intact or in their places the way we were shooting, blowing and burning stuff. We had not shot that day though. He was a boring kind of a guy to me. Things changed when he first brought his father's Fed camera to school. The very first one, manufactured before the World War II. I had some basic idea about photography before that. Much more than the most peers of my age had. My dad was printing the photos, having us, his kids, helping him with that. But I never knew how to take pictures. My dad never taught me that. I think after his failed attempt to teach me to play chess he probably thought that I was an untrainable stupid dork and never bothered to train me of anything else ever since. Well, with Andrei I immediately figured out what was the shutter speed and the aperture for. So, through photography, I started to pal around with him. Soon we developed our first films and printed our first pictures at my house. They were not that bad for a starter. My dad had a Fed 2 camera, a more sophisticated post-World War II version, my father's first major purchase when he made his first money in the mine after school and before he was recruited to the army. Now I know they both were the German Leica replicas. Now I had a dream to buy me a Belarusian camera Vilia which I always admired in the electronic and photo store on my way home after my music classes. Its price tag read 24 rubles. Not that beyond the reach even for me. And I had the motivation to make my first money. It was then when we started to organize our secret societies or try to invent something. We had dreams of buying a film camera. In the spring of 1978 my father was given 2 rooms communal apartment and we moved to the nearby town, but I continued to go to the school and I really hoped to stay here. That would never happen. My attachment to Andrei grew, especially after I had moved to the town. I had no friends. We regularly visited each other. We kept photographing and our pictures' quality constantly grew. My dad gave us some fleeting lessons on paper selection and developing chemical preparation. Criticizing our pictures in his usual grouchy and even rude manner, he unwittingly planted the composition, lighting, and other photography artistic tricks on us, and that very year summer my dad had finally said that I had learned to take good pictures and now I was a full-fledged photographer. I cooperated fine with Andrei. I had my father's enlarger and Andrew, the enlarger lens, so I no longer had to use my father Fed 2 camera's lens to print the pictures. My parents liked Andrei much better than Sergei. My name was no longer at the teacher-parent conference, it was with Sergei's before. Andrei instilled in me the passion for photography. Our shared apartment neighbors also liked Andrei. On the summer holidays, I often went to Andrei's. Almost every day. I mean, I liked living in the town, but I missed my Vincenti friends. I still had none in town. I helped him to graze his cows. He also would come to visit me. Every year in spring a racing season would open in our place and people from the whole Caucasian mineral water would come to bet the horses. It was one of the few legal and government-controlled gambling businesses. I took the job as a delivery boy, and on weekends I collected bet lists from the kiosks and delivered them to the accounting. I was making money for my camera and also helping my parents to pay out their debt to creditors. They had failed in their flour business. Any kind of private enterprises were illegal in the socialistic USSR, and now they were heavily in debt. I wrote about this in my first chapter. And I finally got my coveted camera by the summer. With this camera, I came to Andrei. He was not home. He turned out to have gone to the Asentuki hospital for the surgery to have his tonsils removed. I was lost a bit. He never told me on anything like that coming up. No one had told me anything. Andrei's mother, seeing how upset I was, reassured me he would be back in a week. At the time he was my only friend. I was at odds both with Janya and Sergei, and I still had no friends in town. I think I had my first experience of loneliness and got scared of that. In a week he was back all right. And I was so glad to see him again. He was telling me how he was entertaining his roommates in the hospital, telling them the Conan Doyle The Lost World novel he knew by heart, and how they also threw out of their windows the balloons filled with water. It was fun. Then I was at his place and, for the first time, I saw him a bit annoyed. To my innocent question when he was going to buy his camera, Smina symbol he always wanted, produced by Lomo, the famous lomography manufacturer, company which pretty much looked like my Vilia both externally and by specs but 1 ruble cheaper, 23 rubles, he suddenly blew up at me. Why the hell is that to you when I buy? I buy whenever I feel like it. Understood. I said nothing. What the hell was wrong with him? Unfortunately, it took too long for me to figure out who in fact was the source of his irritation. Soon in July, we went to our school to pay our labor duty. We got enrolled with Andrei to a group of 4 people who were to collect soil samples from all part of a collective farm we were assigned to. We liked it there. We were riding in a UAZ Jeep vehicle all day long on the fields, stopped here and there to dip up samples and put them to marked bags. I still hope to stay in this school. It would have worked just fine with me. It would only take half an hour for me to get there by a commuter bus. I did not know yet that my parents had a different opinion on that matter. And something was getting really wrong with Andrei. He started snarling at me really bad. And Valero with Igor I always kept both in check felt that right then and started coming together against me. I didn't like it at all. Things were getting dangerous to me. Igor once got so brazen to dare to come on to me. He got his ass kicked out good for that, alright. I was getting really bad myself. I didn't know what the fuck was going on with Andrei there. Okay, I said to myself, once Andrei comes to visit me, I will have a really serious talk with him. But no longer would he come to me, he would turn down my invitations and his attitude towards me kept deteriorating. Valera started raising his voice at me, and when I went to show him his place, Andrei, all of a sudden, took his side. I managed to avoid any open conflicts with him so far, but it certainly was going to this. That was my first experience of this kind. I felt betrayed. But why? What had I done to him? That's what I wanted to find out. I had to talk about it with him at my place, but he wouldn't go. Now I saw I was losing my only friend I had. And I had one of my first depression when I was 13 years old. Well, the first depression I had, was when I was 10 after I had read one Soviet juvenile book about after the war children in USSR. This book, its stories emanated such an agonizing sadness, a dolor in me. Not so long ago, I found this book and tried to reread it. I put it away. I immediately felt that my first depression. These kinds of books were sometimes released for children. The writer was a woman, by the way, who has written this book. Anyways. I was all alone in town now. I stopped going to that works. Fuck them. Okay, I thought, when I am back at school I'll get even with all of them. I had dethroned Stepan himself, the fittest in the class, once, and I made him an outcast and set my whole class against him. I would get even with all of them. I'll see to it. Still, I felt hurt. Andrew, my friend, was against me. This I could never forgive. Now I kept company with Sergey, the guy my parents could not stand. Maybe because of him my parents took me to another school, the closest to my new home. It was a shame. Among other things, I had a plan to rule my class with Sergey's help. This time I was going to be really tough, even cruel to them. I was bursting with revenge and I wanted blood. Aunt Valia, our next door woman, also noticed that I was no longer palling around with Andrei, and she felt bad about it too. She liked him. He suddenly showed up a month later. He came to take his enlarger lens back. He came with his neighborhood friend who came for the summer. I gave it to him without saying a word to him and closed the door on him. He had asked me though, "You haven't twisted its neck, have you?" Fuck you. This fall I went to a different school, alright. Got myself enrolled again to the wrestling section. I still stayed in touch with Sergey. Next summer I suddenly met with Andrei. I and Jinya were playing football behind that single railroad track near his home, and a group of boys joined us. Andrei was in that group too. All the boys were younger than him, and that clearly meant he had nobody to keep company with. Jinya had asked me if I didn't mind Andrei playing with us. It was okay with me unless he played on my team. I felt that this man was determined to make peace with me. The team he was in lost the game, but he was in a good mood anyway. When I went to a bus stop to go home, he went with me. I didn't care much about it, but since he went with me I was finally going to have that conversation with him. Okay. What had caused his hostile attitude towards me? That he was seeing a girl and I was sort of on his way to it. When I came to him that afternoon, the day I was asking about a camera he was going to buy, he had a date with her I had messed with. Why didn't you just tell me about it? I would understand and leave. It didn't feel right. You were my guest after all. What would it look like if I had sent you back home? What did it look like to terminate our friendship instead? He said nothing. He awkwardly offered to make peace instead. We shook hands. We resumed our friendship. It was good enough to pay each other occasional short visits, but it was nothing like it used to be. We never printed pictures together. Neither had we traded our books. I now understand that he must have tired of me and did not find anything better way than to break off any kind of relations with me. Since I had no friends in town, I must have been harassing him with my frequent visits while he already was dating a girl. In the end, I did the same thing to Fat Sergey. I stay in touch with him on social networks.